Now, I want to ask all of you a question. I want you to type in your answers in the chat. How many of you feel like you've had to change the way you work as a result of the pandemic? So how many of you feel like you've had to change the way you work as a result of the pandemic? Share in the chat yes, no, if it's the same, say it's the same. Let's find out. Okay. All right, so I am seeing most of you are saying yes. Megan, Caroline, for Darlene and Zenita, it's almost the same, but for many people, they've had to change the way they work. Now, this is what we're seeing with the result of the pandemic. Pandemic has, for many industries, many people have to shift their gear and they have to take on remote working, remote learning. Now, there are a lot of benefits to this, having the opportunity, the flexibility to be able to work from home, maybe to be able to do other things with your family, trying to juggle everything around. And there's also some benefits for organizations as well. But on the flip side, what we are finding is that people are more stressed. Now, there was a survey by the American Psychological Association, which said that 7 out of 10 people say that they're more stressed after this pandemic than before the pandemic. So it's definitely, on the flip side, it has affected our mental well-being. People are more stressed. And what we're going to do today is find out how can we better that mental well-being with remote working. Is my audio soft? Oh, okay, let me just check if my audio is okay, is it better now? Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So thank you for letting me know. So that's great. Thank you for that prompt feedback so that I can improve and do better and make sure that you can hear clearly. So for today's agenda, what we are going to look at firstly is what is the current reality? What is happening with hybrid work? Now, secondly, what are the positives and negatives of hybrid work? And lastly, how can we create better mental well-being for you in today's workplace? So firstly, the current reality of hybrid work. Now, you must have heard of these terms: flexible remote work, flexible work arrangements, remote work arrangements, hybrid work arrangements. Now, what are the differences between all three? There is actually a difference, and let me clarify this for you. So firstly, flexible work arrangements means variations in work arrangements. So they include both hybrid and remote working. They also include other forms of work arrangements. You may have heard this even before the pandemic, things like compressed work week, where people are working, if they are working 40 hours in 5 days, they're working 40 hours in 4 days instead. Now, when it comes to remote working, we're looking at people who are not having to go into the office. So many of us during the pandemic, we had to adopt remote working. We had to work outside of the office, and it could mean you could work in any location. Now, before the pandemic, I had one of my friends who was living here, and her husband had the opportunity to remote work. So both the kids were going to international school, very costly, and they found that they couldn't afford to live here any longer. So what they did was they actually pack their bags and remote work to Bali instead. So they're I'm not sure how they're doing now. I don't think the situation is that good in Indonesia, but that's what they did. They were able to work at any place, and that's what we call remote working. So 0 days in the office. Now, hybrid working, on the other hand, is what we're hearing a lot. It's about working from both the office and outside of the office. So we see things like 3 days in the office or 2 days in the office and the rest at home. Now, many organizations are starting to adopt this. For example, we see in DBS, one of our local banks, right? So they said that they're allowing 40% of their workers to work from home. And HSBC, for example, said that they're allowing 80% of their workers to choose whatever type of work arrangements that they want. So we're seeing a lot of shift in this. Sorry, when I said 40%, I meant they're allowing their workers to work 40% of the time from home. Sorry, not 40% of the workers. Let me just correct that. Now, so we're seeing a lot of organizations now moving in this direction and adopting this type of work arrangements. So I want to check with you, what do you prefer? Now, I want to just mention here that I know not everybody can choose their preferences. Not everybody is going to have that opportunity to be able to choose the type or the number of days they can work from home. But let's get a feeling, let's get an understanding of what your preferences are. So I want you to either scan the QR code or click on the link, the Mentimeter link, which Jonta has very kindly shared, and select the option you prefer to complete this statement. So I'll give you about a minute, click on the link or scan the QR code and share with us what is your preference. And I'm going to share the results with you very shortly. So as the results are coming in, many of you are answering. Okay, we'll just wait for a few more minutes. Okay, so I'm going to share the results with you. I think most of you have completed. We have 17 of you who have completed. And we'll start to see this move along as more of you do complete. But what we can see here is that majority of you would prefer 2 days at the office in Singapore. And what we see here is almost, we could say that 94%, no, let's have a look here. Actually, 100% of you prefer some form of hybrid or remote working, because none of you have actually said 5 days a week in the office. So most of you do prefer some form of hybrid or remote working, with the majority saying 2 days would be the ideal. So let me come back to my slides. Okay, let me show you what is happening in Singapore. What are people's preferences? Okay, so let's have a look here. Now, I actually did a survey on LinkedIn last week where I got 137 responses. Now, this was many of the respondents who answered this were from Singapore, US, Denmark, Turkey, Poland. So international audience has actually majority said that they do prefer remote working, and followed up by what most of you have said, 2 days, 1 to 2 days a week. So this is very interesting. Now, when we look at what do Singaporeans prefer? Do they prefer working from home? Well, there was a study which was done, and out of 880,000 people in Singapore found that 9 out of 10 would prefer some form of hybrid work. Now, 0%, I do not want to work from home. 8.6% said that they do not want to work from home. Majority is along what you said, along what you had rated, which was about 65% of you, 65% here, Singaporeans prefer at least 2 to 3 days in the office. Okay. So now that we know what the current reality is, let's look at what are some of the positives and negatives of hybrid work. So firstly, we're going to do a sharing. So I want you to share. So scan the QR code, or Jonta will also include the link in the chat. What are some of the benefits that you have experienced with hybrid work? What did you enjoy about working from home? Share in the, click on the link and complete the Mentimeter that's being sent. Okay, I'm going to share the results with you. As most of you have responded. So let's have a look here. Okay, can everybody see the screen? All good? Okay, so what you can see here is that I'm just having a read here that many are saying that flexibility of time, no time traveling, so zero time commuting is something which you like. Cutting travel time, can do some housework during breaks, meals with family. Okay, great. More freedom. So freedom, flexibility, save time in travel, less traveling time. Yes, more family time. As a result, spending less time, you have more time doing other things. None. The work doesn't allow me to work from home. However, we do all our meetings, lectures, and courses online. Now, this is a very fair statement. Now, not all organizations do have not all roles actually have that opportunity where they can work from home, like healthcare workers, or if you're in retail, and some other work professionals where, if you are a pilot, you do have to fly the aeroplane. So some jobs just do not allow you to work from home and don't create this opportunity for this flexible work arrangements. But looks like most of you do prefer the flexibility, the freedom, ability to spend more time and have more time with your family and doing other things which you like. Okay, so just as some of you said, flexibility with schedule. Now, when I ran this, when I did this survey before, I even had someone who said that they are able to have lunch with their husband every day, and they really enjoyed this. Well, some of us may feel like we want to have lunch every day. Might feel like it's too much to have lunch every day with our husband or wife or partners. But this flexibility of schedule, being able to maybe pick up your kids from school, or being able to cook, being able to do other things is a really important asset, which many people are seeing with hybrid work arrangements. Secondly, saving time with commuting. Now in Singapore, we're spending about 90 minutes commuting. And of course, even things like dressing up, having to, I know someone who's a lawyer, and she actually tells me that she has to wear, white shirt with her black jacket. So she dresses up halfway. She doesn't have to do a full dress up. And, with Zoom, we now have filters where we can make us look better, even without having to put on makeup. So some ladies or men may find that they're spending less time dressing up. Other things is that some people do feel that they're more productive and focused. So they have a really ideal workspace, which is really quiet. They're able to shut themselves out and not have that interruptions, which they may have in an open plan office. Now, if you are an introvert, you may find that open plan offices can be quite challenging, and having that opportunity to work from home helps you to be more focused and productive. Okay. So I want you to make a guess in the chat. I'm going to show you 3 options. Now, I want you to decide which group has the highest percentage of workers feeling most productive when working from home. Is it remote workers, office workers, or hybrid workers? So share in the chat, what do you think? Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so Megan, Zanita, Caroline, May, you've said hybrid work. And Darlene, you said all types, so all is equally productive. Okay, Caleb, you said office workers. Po Chung, you said also office workers as well. Now, majority of you, well, it's a half and half, saying hybrid and office. But let's find out which is the percentage where workers actually feel most productive. Interestingly, it is the remote workers. So remote workers said that they actually feel, those who do not go into the office feel that they're the most productive, followed by office workers and hybrid workers at the end. Okay, now we're going to move into, we looked at the positives of hybrid work arrangements. Let's touch on what are some of the negatives. I want you to share in the chat, what are some of the negatives you have personally experienced as a result of hybrid work or working from home? Okay, let's have a look. Now, Megan, you said end up working nonstop because there are no work boundaries. So it's like your work and life are merging. So therefore, even you may be taking work after your work hours. Now, this is what we are seeing a lot of people who are saying that they are working longer hours and working nonstop. Chia Ying, you said inability to focus. Yes, this can be a problem. You know, if you don't have a proper workstation, you don't have the opportunity of space. You know, in Singapore, we may not have that opportunity, right, of space, being able to have a proper work from home station. Eileen, you also said longer hours of work is compared to working in office. Yes, I'm going to touch on why this is so and in a second. Colleen, you said late lunch, and Darlene, you said always on. And this is a really important point, is that we are now with hybrid work, we are in a culture where it's always on. Even when people want to take vacations, they because they're not leaving the country, they do feel like they are always on. They have to check their phones, they have to check their emails, and or even if they don't want to, it just pops up in their phone as well. Jonta, you said more procrastinating is working hours stretch beyond 7. Yes, that can be the case. Definitely feeling when working hours are stretched, you know, it does affect. It's not always about the hours of work, right? It's about how productive we are. So working longer hours can deplete our mental capacity, and therefore we may procrastinate as a result. Okay, so let's have a look. Filza, you said, realize I'm really bad at managing my time and setting boundaries. Now, you mentioned such an important point about managing your time and setting boundaries. And we'll talk about, you know, how can we address this and help you with some of this when we talk about better mental well-being. Okay, so let's have a look here. Hybrid work arrangements. So many of you have shared really good points. One of the things which we are seeing in research and coming out with some of the latest data is that people are feeling that it's really difficult to communicate. One message may take multiple emails to send, as opposed to walking across to your colleague and clarifying something. In fact, the Microsoft Work Trend Index said that what they found out of 30,000 employees globally, their meetings have doubled. Their meetings have doubled. So this will contribute to, you know, some of you having to work longer hours as well. Another thing which we are seeing is a visibility. Workers are concerned that they're not visible, that they're not being seen. And there was a study which was done in China, not in Singapore, in China, and they had 250 workers where they divided them into 2 groups. One group, they were told that you can work from home for 4 days. Another group of participants had to be at work for 5 days. What they found was at the end of around 18 months was that those who were in the office were promoted because they had higher visibility, and therefore their supervisors could see the work that they were doing. Now, this is a concern. Now, we're not looking at the management side of things, but this is something that I just want to highlight, that many workers, some of you may feel concerned about. Another thing is Zoom and video fatigue. You know, Darlene, you said always on. It could be having one Zoom meeting after another, after another, after another. And sometimes you don't even have the control of your schedule. You have people scheduling meetings even before you can say yes, and it's inside your calendar. So these are some of the things which I hear my clients saying. It's inside my calendar before I can even say yes. Working longer hours, definitely. And another challenge is balancing work and life. Now, how do we how do we balance this? Our boundaries are being blurred. I think Philza, you mentioned about setting boundaries, and another one of you said, Megan, you said no boundaries. So that boundaries of work and life is merging. When we have our kids at home, we might have to, especially during the circuit breaker. For those of you who do have kids, it can be extremely challenging. And I know for me personally, it was very, very challenging to have my 6-year-old at home with school where he's not really able to complete things on his own, so work and life, the boundaries are starting to blur with hybrid work arrangements. Okay, what we're seeing in Singapore specifically is that these are the top 3 reasons. So just as you said, working longer hours, many of you said this, Anita, who else said this? Let's see. Eiling, you said this as well. So many of you are saying working longer hours. Another thing is a practical aspect. In Singapore, we have small space, the constraint of small space, not having the right work from home setup, and disturbances from family sometimes can be quite distracting. Thirdly, access to resources and tools. Now, this was, some organizations may not have prepared workers to work from home, and some may have struggled with not having the right tools and resources for this. Okay, now I want to touch quickly on the causes of Zoom fatigue, because what I hear is that many people are experiencing this. Now, we call it Zoom fatigue, but it could be any form of video fatigue. It could be Microsoft, it could be WebEx, any type of video chat that you're having, it causes some form of fatigue. Now, what is Zoom fatigue? So it's a feeling of being tired and exhausted after Zoom meetings and Zoom calls and Zoom conferences. And sorry, we're having another Zoom chat here, but hopefully this is very engaging and you find it more interesting and feel energized after this. But the reasons for this includes, and what we saw in research is that you have an eye gaze at a closer distance. Now, when we are intimate with somebody, when we're close to somebody, research says that we maintain about less than 60 centimeter distant from them. Now, if I tell you to take a ruler or measuring tape to measure your eye gaze to your screen, which is the eye gaze of another person's, it's less than 60 centimeter. And what we're seeing is that people are having high levels of physiological arousal, which is why many of you probably have your cameras off, because it's much more comfortable, right? You're not having to look at the screen and monitor how you are expressing your expressions as well. Another thing is that it takes more cognitive load when you are on Zoom calls. The ability to interpret responses, ability to understand somebody's facial reactions, and the ability for you to convey your facial expressions is much harder. So most of the time, now I'm standing a bit back, so you can see my hands, but Jonta here, you can't see his hands. So you can see his head nodding, but we can't see his full body expression. So this leaves people feeling quite anxious, not sure how are you responding, so sometimes during my coaching call, I'm sitting down. Now I'm standing, but I'm sitting down. And I realize when I'm talking, sometimes they don't see my hands. They don't see my hands moving. So, you have to work harder. It takes more cognitive load. And there was a study which was done between comparing video and audio modes of learning. What they found was that those who were on the audio made less mistakes than those who, when they were given a task, made less mistakes when they were on audio versus video. So quite interesting here. Now, another thing is people spend more effort vocalizing. So this is something, what they saw in research, that people are speaking 15% louder when they're on Zoom calls or video calls, any form of video calls. Now, this is not a surprise because, where I am is quite far from where my husband is working. But there are times when I hear him shouting and I wonder what is going on. I go and look and he's just having a meeting. And I ask him, why are you talking so loud? He's like, I'm not talking so loud at all. But he's spending more time, more effort vocalizing. So this is what happens. We are making up for not being able to be physically seen, right? Okay. Lastly, people are feeling stressed. In Singapore, 92% say they are stressed. And in Asia, same as what Darlene said, an always on culture. 80% claim to be an always on working environment. Okay, now that we looked at the positives and negatives, what can we do about it? What can we do to create better mental well-being? So firstly, what is mental well-being? What does it mean to have high mental well-being? Now, please meet Sarah here. She looks very happy and joyful, and I'm sure all of us want to be smiling like this and looking happy like this all the time. But what does that mean? So Sarah has high subjective well-being. What this means is that she experiences 4 things. First, high levels of life satisfaction. This means that she's highly satisfied with her life. She's happy with how her life is. She would evaluate her life, if it was on a scale of 10, she would evaluate it as 8 or 9. Now, high levels of positive emotions. So most of the time she's feeling happy, she's feeling joyful. She's also, having positive emotions is not just about those outward positive emotions like joyful and happy. It could also be these inward type of emotions, which are like peaceful, feeling contented. Those are also positive emotions. Thirdly, low levels of negative emotions. So here what we are seeing is that low levels of anger, sadness, depression, anxiety. And I just want to make a point here is that negative emotions are not bad. Now, negative emotions have a great value and are important for us. But here what we're seeing is that lower levels of negative emotions. So it's not taking over you or not taking over your day. And it's not something which you have throughout the day. So someone who has high subjective well-being has lower levels of negative emotions. And lastly, they have the ability to function optimally. So they feel that they are at their optimal level. They feel that they are thriving in their lives. So this is what we call high subjective well-being and high mental well-being. So now how can we get there, right? So this is the important question. Now we have 4 strategies or 4 areas which you can look at. And the first one is know and communicate your preferences. So my preferences. All right, so what do we mean by this? Now, firstly, I want to say that everybody has different preferences when it comes to working from home. Now, some people like to merge their work and life. What this means is that they can take calls. They don't mind taking calls, probably after the work hours. So maybe at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, or they don't mind answering emails over the weekend, and they don't mind stopping their work and then picking up their kids from school. So they have this very flexible boundary here. So this is what we call integration. They prefer flexible work boundaries where their home and work are blended. Okay, now someone who prefers segmentation would prefer to work 9 to 5, maybe in Singapore, not 9 to 5, I should say 9 to 7 or 8 to 6, 8 to 6. And then after that, when they're off work, they do not want to be disturbed. They want to focus on their family. They want to focus on their leisure activities. And this is what we call home and work are separate. So they prefer inflexible zone boundaries. This is called segmentation. Now we're going to find out, what do you prefer? So I want you to see if on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being total integration, that means your work and life are merged, and 1 being total segmentation, what is your preference? Now, Jonta's going to share share what each one means as well. And you can scan the Mentimeter to also answer. Thank you, Jonta, for sharing that. Okay, we just have 12 of you who responded. We'll just wait for a few more minutes before I share the, well, not a few more minutes, a few more seconds before I share the results. Okay, I'm going to share it now. Okay, so let's have a look here. We had 16 of you who've responded. Now I can see many of you are, on average, we see most of you are at 28.1. So you're leaning towards more segmentation. So you do prefer more of being able to have a boundary between your work and your life and not have them integrated together. So this is what we're seeing. Many of you, I think some of you are here in want to completely segmentate, but most of you can see around 11 of you around the 20, I would say about the 25% mark. Okay, so what does this really mean? Why is it important to know this? Okay, so it's important to know this because what we see is that stress occurs when people are made to go outside of their preferences, either to integrate or to segmentate. So if you're somebody who prefer to segmentate, you prefer that separation now, but your work says you need to take calls at 8 p.m., you need to answer your emails on the weekend, you're going to feel stressed. So it's really important, firstly, to know this for yourself, know what your preferences are. And if you can, if you have that opportunity to communicate this. Now, when I do this with leaders, I do share this, how important it is to have this conversation with the people around you, to communicate what are their preferences, what is important for them, because then you're going to have workers who are highly engaged. So very important is you as an individual, if you have that opportunity, you have a leader, you're working for an organization which is understanding, it's important to set that boundaries and to communicate that. Okay. Now going into the second part, having better work from home practices. So let me see here. I remember Filza, I think Filza was talking about managing, realize I'm really bad at managing my time and setting boundaries. Now, these tips here are really going to help you, Fiza. So firstly, creating a work from home space. You got to be creative. Now, when in May, we had a circuit breaker. Many of you know we had a circuit breaker. Kids could not go to school. Now, my son goes to international school. So his school was still running until mid-June. We had to work from home. He's 6 years old. He's not really the type who can sit on a computer for too long and work from home. And I have an office space which has sliding doors, these glass doors. And he would come in, open the door and say, "Hi, mommy, I have a question to ask you." I'm like, no, I'm in a meeting. I can't take. So I had to move my desk into my bedroom. What you see at the back is actually my wardrobe. So even though you might not have realized it, it's actually my wardrobe. So you have to be creative. Some people even have their offices in their wardrobes. So I've seen many creative ways, and you might have some creative ways to share with us about how to create a work from home space. Secondly, so important to have a schedule. Now, one of my clients from China, he's Australian, but he's working in China for an MNC. And when he came to me for coaching, he was highly stressed, very unhappy, was starting to feel really disengaged with the work he was doing. He's a senior director. And what he found was that he told me that he was working and taking meetings at 11 p.m. because he had to deal with the US market, 12 midnight, sometimes taking it at 2 a.m. So it's natural that he's going to feel exhausted after some period of time. This can't continue. When we had a conversation, we started to find what was the best way to go about this. And it was about developing a schedule. What he did was he decided he was going to do 1 day a week to take late night calls. So he would schedule Mondays for most of his late night calls. So he would take most of them, and it's okay. It was okay, whatever time of schedule, he was fine with it. As long as it was one day, it was not 5 days. And when after a few weeks, I started to say, hey, I do notice the shift with you. And he said, yeah, well, you're not the only one, because my staff are also noticing that I'm much happier and I'm much more engaged and I'm feeling much more joyful. So having a schedule is so important. Set times for disconnecting every day. We are in Singapore, we're about, I think there was a study on this which said we're almost more than 12 hours on our screens every day. You need to set that time to disconnect away from your screens, away from your devices. And what we see in research is that the time which you spend in quiet time, it actually improves your learning and improves your memory as well. Thirdly, you need to communicate your schedule and preferences. So very important. Now, I acknowledge that this may not be possible for everybody, but if you do have that possibility, it's important to communicate that preferences and schedule you have. Okay, disconnect when on leave. Now, Jonta may have experienced this for me. When I am on leave, I am disconnected. So he tried to email me when I was on leave, and he also sent me a message. And I didn't respond, because this is how I like to be on leave. Is I try to inform all of my clients before, and everybody that I need to be in touch with when I am going on leave. I let them know I am going on leave, especially if I'm working with them if I'm taking a week off, I'll say I'm taking a week off. If there's anything, let me know beforehand. And I like to disconnect when on leave. But the funny thing was that I think, Jonta, you mentioned that it was a very, you realize that, it is possible. It is possible. You can disconnect when you're on leave in Singapore, even though you're not overseas. Many people feel uncomfortable to disconnect when they're not overseas, but I encourage you to disconnect when you're on leave as well. And take breaks between video meetings. So important. Now, I want to ask you a question. Do you take breaks during the meeting? Share in the chat, yes or no. Do you take breaks between video meetings? Okay. Okay, I can see here that it's around the 50-50 mark. So Darlene, you're saying you have back-to-back meetings all day. May, you said sometimes. Kim, yes. Albert, yes. Jonta, very little at times. Will cram many Zoom meetings as possible in one day. Mel, no, as sometimes back-to-back. And I can understand that. Sometimes it can be challenging. But I want to share with you this study, which was done by Microsoft. This was recently published as well in 2021, so very current. What they did here was that they did a study and evaluated people, their employees who were going into meetings from meeting 1, meeting 2, meeting 3, meeting 4 with no breaks. So they had two groups, one with no break, one who took a break. Now, what you'll see here is those who were who took the breaks, you can see here that they are actually less stressed. So the blue and green represents less stress, okay, when they did the monitoring of the electrical activity. Now, those who took no breaks felt more stressed. So the group who took a break took actually a 15-minute break and did a 15-minute meditation. Now, I want to share with you something. I know that it's not possible to have a break, and you may have back-to-back meetings all day. But one of the suggestions that I want to share, which I actually do try this, and it has actually worked fine, is that to suggest to the person who's attending that meeting, say, hey, could we stop 5 minutes? So if it's at 30 minutes, I'll say stop 5 minutes before the meeting. Can we stop? If your meeting is starting at 2 o'clock, say, hey, could we stop at 2:25 at this meeting? So this gives you a 5 minutes buffer to take a breather, take a walk, go get a glass of water, and even that reset can be so important. Now, if you have an hour meeting, it could be setting it for 15 minutes instead of a full 1 hour, so that you have that 10 minutes to just take a breather as you're going into one meeting and preventing yourself from getting stressed. Okay, thirdly, creating positive relationships. So what is creating positive relationships? How do we describe that? How do we say somebody who has positive relationships? Now, if you said you had positive relationships, you would say, I have warm, satisfying, and trusting personal and professional relationships. This is what you would say if you said you have positive relationships. Now, why is this so important? We see this over and over and over again in research that social support, positive relationships are a high buffer for stress. So having the right people around you, having that community to support you, who understand you, where you feel the warmth, where you feel that you can trust them, you feel satisfied with that relationship, can be a huge buffer for stress. So how to create positive relationships? Well, there's some tips here. Now, one thing is to show concern about others. It's about asking them, how are you doing? How is your day going? So as opposed to, just being in your own head, asking them, what's going through? What's happening for you? Secondly, demonstrating strong empathy. Now, we know that during this time, it's hard for many people. Many people are going through a lot of tough times, and it's about putting yourself into other person's shoe. Sometimes we do not know why certain behaviors we may not understand, but it's just about being empathetic and giving them the benefit of the doubt. Thirdly, it's about give and take in a relationship. Now, giving is so important, and it's actually even good for you. So there was a study which was done on children. They had 3 groups of children. Now, they told the groups of children, one group of children said that, hey, you're going to see a puppet show. Another group of children, you're going to receive a treat. The third group of children, they were given a treat and told that they need to give it away to someone. They found that the children who were told they had to give away their own treat, experienced highest levels of happiness and positive emotions. So even though sometimes it's hard to give, but it actually is really beneficial for you as well. And it creates positive relationships. Now, the last one, fill my cup. Keep my cup full. Okay, I said fill my cup. Keep my cup full. Okay. Now imagine let's say you are the cup, you represent a cup. Let's say Bhali. Bhali is a cup. Now the water in the cup represents your mental energy, your physical energy, your emotional energy. What happens during the day is that you're taking this cup and bringing it into different meetings and different interactions, maybe dealing with your supervisor, dealing with your team, dealing with your children, dealing with your partner. And what happens is that you're constantly pouring out of this cup as you go from one meeting to another and one interaction to another. And at the end of the day, you may find, oh no, my cup is empty. And an empty cup is one which feels tired, which feels burnt out, which feels exhausted, depressed. And it's so important to keep that cup full, with energy, and to take good care of yourself. So there are a few things which you can do, and I'm sure many of you are already doing great things. But one, me time, having that time for you. Secondly, spending time with others. I know it's challenging sometimes during this COVID-19, but there's many things we can do to spend time to connect and build those positive relationships. Thirdly, doing things which you like, which you enjoy. Fourthly, spending time exercising. Can't emphasize how important this is for our body to move. Fifth, diet, and of course, our sleep. Now, I know in Singapore, sometimes we lack sleep. We're not sleeping enough. So really important. Some of these things can help you to keep your cup full. Okay, so we have 4 things here, which are going to help you to create a better mental well-being. Now, know and communicate my preferences. 1, 2, have better work from home practices. 3, create positive relationships. And 4, keep your cup full. We're going to go into a short 5-minute breakout room activity where what I want you to do is I want you to share a tip which you have applied to improve your mental well-being in any of these 4 areas. Jonta, if you could share the full write-up so that they could see it while they are also in the breakout rooms. So the 4 areas are here, but Jonta will also share it here so that you can have a look. What I want you to do is share your answers in your groups and Jamboard. Now, you won't be able to access it on Jamboard if you don't have the app. So it's better to access it if you are on your laptop. If you don't have the app, maybe you can ask your group mates. Now, I will give you 5 minutes to have this interaction and to share a tip which you're already using to improve your mental well-being in any of these 4 areas. Okay, Jonta, if you could open up the breakout rooms for. So just having a look at what some of you had some really, really good tips. One of you said here, disconnect everything and then go to some quiet place to recharge my thoughts. Absolutely. So such an important thing to do, to disconnect. And, as I was saying it, disconnecting and that silence actually helps with your memory and learning as well. One of you said listening to songs, music when I'm not on a call. Yes, and this can also, in fact, recharge you. And it can be when you're going into something challenging, if you're listening to something that's inspirational, it can actually charge you up and give you a lot of good energy. Other things which you've been using, you said going to the community library or library to do work when I feel unproductive. Great, just a change of an environment, change of doing something which is different. Some of you said doing meditation. So really great tips. Now we will send this across to you after today's session so that you have some of these tips that you can use. Now, so for today, we've covered these 3 areas. What's the current reality of hybrid work? Positive and negatives, creating better mental well-being. Now, I want to end off the session with sharing this, which was found by Microsoft, a survey which was done with over 3,000 workers globally, said that 1 in 6 workers actually cried with a coworker. Now, this may seem scary. It may seem sad, but it's actually not a bad thing. As Jared Spataro said, before the pandemic, we encouraged people to bring their whole self to work, but it was tough to truly empower them to do that. The shared vulnerability of this time has given us a huge opportunity to bring real authenticity to company culture and transform work for the better. So even though, 1 in 6 cried, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I must say that during this time, I've reached out to many people, and I've also had my moments of tears as well. And in fact, I've actually created more positive connections during this time as a result. So before I go, we just have a few more things to share with you. If you can, share with us one takeaway that you've had from this session. Share it in the chat. What is that one takeaway that you've had from this session today? I know we're slightly going over time, so bear with me. We just have like a few more minutes and we should be done really shortly. Okay, so many of you are saying have a break between, Constance, you said have a break between meetings. Caroline, you said disconnect when on leave. May as well. Ayla, you said setting boundaries and having a schedule as well. So really good takeaways. I'll leave this to you to continue adding those takeaways as I go on and share a few more things. Now, if you do need help, please take a screenshot of this. I will also send you some slides where I'll include this slide so you have these contact numbers if you do need to seek additional help and counseling. Now, just before I end, I want to share with you a few things about what we do. And one of the things is that we provide executive and life coaching, and we also provide well-being, mental health and well-being training solutions. So we have a number of programs customized for organizations to help them with their mental well-being. And just to share with you very quickly about why choose us. Now, we are specialized in well-being at work locally and even globally. So we work with local organizations in Singapore and also global MNCs as well. Now, all our programs are backed by research. As you can see that here, that I do love to share a lot of research. And it's really important that whatever you're going to apply to and help your employees or help the people around you or even apply to your own life is going to work, is going to make a difference for you. Thirdly, we contextualize to your needs, and our programs are meant to be fun, inspiring, creative, and really interactive as well. And we have, our testimonials are always growing and growing, and we have more than 150 testimonials. Now, do keep in touch. We'll send you an email with my details as well, and Jonto will share it in the chat shortly. But before you go, if we could ask you to complete a survey, we would be so grateful. Now, this survey is going to help me to develop and to continue to grow, help our company to grow, and so that we can learn about what's working well, what could we do better. So we really hope that you can share with us some of your thoughts. Okay. And with that, I have to say thank you so much. And thank you, Jonta, for having me. And thank you all for your great participation.
Thank you so much, Miss Bhali. When I heard that you actually prepared a very custom, almost a learning session for us, I'm really, really grateful. This is a pro bono contribution by Miss Bhali to us. And at first, I don't really expect this kind of quality, but like, you have added the research back, you have spent time to set up the Mentimeter. Well, I'm really, really grateful for the time you have spent. I think cumulatively about 5 to 6 hours has gone to this preparation. A bit of backstory on the publish. When I tried to contact Miss Bhali, is basically I'm being chased by a publicity deadline. So like, it just happened that the date that I need to push out the events, like confirmation, I'm pending Miss Bhali's confirmation, and she has gone for leave. So when the email bounced, hey, I'm actually on leave until like at least 2-3 weeks later, which is beyond the deadline, I thought to myself, okay, I have a few options. Either I call you and breaking that like, hey, I'm out of office, it's not very pleasant, or I drop you a message hoping that like maybe you would spare one day to come back. But I was really surprised when I received no response. And then we catch up after that, and like you show me that like, it's actually possible to set a boundary, say, yes, I'm on leave, anything that's work-wise can wait. So we waited. I mean, it's I'm just surprised that like because normally like people will jump in. If I'm in that position, I will jump in. It means that I will sacrifice my leave to actually jump in to entertain work. But it's definitely something that I have to pick up and be better at in terms of like setting out that boundary. Work and life.
It's just like things can run. A lot of things can run sometimes without us responding. Sometimes we think we need to constantly respond, or we need to be there, and a lot of times things do work out. Everything works out. It does. It's having trust and having faith that it's okay. I think someone's entering the room. Okay. It's just having that faith and having that trust that things will work out, and it's okay to take that leave. And I know in Singapore it's very hard for many to be able to go on that leave, especially if you're not going on vacation. So I really encourage you, when you are on leave, just prep, let the people know around you who need to contact you during that 2 weeks. I am going to be disconnected, I am going to be away. And if you do get a message, it's okay. You've told the people who do need to know that you are away. And if it's a life and death matter, then it's different, right? But if it's not, then they can be functioning without you. And thanks, Jonta, for being patient as well with me.